So we are about to leave. We just got a call from the post office that baby chicks are here. And so we're heading out to grab those. Alice is coming with me because she's got some silkies in the box. And so we're going to take you along with us. Let's see what we're dealing with. I hope everybody's okay. Oh, it looks like they are. Right now, I'm out in the barn just getting the brooder situated. I'll show you guys kind of what we have set up when we have a big order like this come in. So yes, babies are settled, babies are good. I'll check on them several times throughout the day to make sure they're getting adjusted okay, but they're good. And thanks for hanging out with us while we got chickens today. They're so cute. Let's quickly chat a little bit about chickens and ducks, and probably more about chickens than ducks because I know a lot more about chickens than I do ducks. I have some experience with ducks, but all right, for the purposes of what I wanted to say, I'd had a few questions on like what's better for the homestead, chickens or ducks, and it really depends on what your goals are. So obviously I have a lot of chickens. I always have had chickens. I love them. I think they're very cool to watch. They scratch around. I like the way that they look in the yard whenever they're hanging out and all those things. One thing to consider when you're bringing any kind of fowl, I guess, for lack of a better word, obviously that can extend to turkeys, like peafowl, even pheasants, quail, all kinds of different things. There's the options are just about endless. But for the purposes of this, I'm mostly just going to cover the basics, which are chickens and ducks, kind of the first two that come to mind whenever you're just getting started, and kind of go over those. So with me, in my opinion, I think chickens are a little simpler to take care of, but it really depends on your property. So here, I don't really have like a pond, okay? Now, not all ducks need a pond. Runner ducks are one type of duck that does not have to have a constant water source. Now, any duck is always and forever going to need a water container that they can dip their entire like bill and everything into, because they have to clean their nares when they're eating. Otherwise they get dry and they have problems breathing. So that's, you know, something to think about if you have like I've used like the nipple drinkers and like the little cup waterers before for poultry, for like my chickens, and it kind of prevents any messes with water. It kind of prevents them like accidentally dumping out their water, or if they kick shavings in there to the point, you know, or dirt to the point they can't really drink it anymore. It's easier to keep water clean when you have chickens, even if you are just using little buckets of water. A duck is going to be messy. They always are. Okay. And so when you bring them in, they can coexist together, but you just have to make a couple of exceptions for your duck. Okay. If you have ducks and chickens together, just make sure your duck has somewhere to kind of put her little face in and really make sure her nares are cleaned out. Nares being like her little nose holes, so that she'll stay happy and healthy. But all that to say, so do you have a place where they can swim around? Like, or are you going to have to get some type of kiddie pool situation if you end up with ducks that need and want to be, you know, in water all the time, which most of them will definitely play in water all the time. But like I said, runner ducks are the ones you see a lot of times they'll use like in vineyards for like slug control and stuff. They don't really mind just being on land and having access to water every now and then, so they're pretty happy with whatever. Those are the ones that are kind of like tall and like longer necked. A little funny looking if you're not used to them, but those, in my opinion, make a great duck if you do want ducks but you don't have access to a really big body of water. And I'm speaking from experience because I've had khaki Campbells and I would put out big kiddie pools for them and they're fine, but ultimately those are getting dirty every single day and you're having to clean them out about every single day. So it's lots of water that you're, you know, as far as water bill goes, or if you're on a well, it's probably not a problem, but you know, if you're on like city or county water or whatever and you're filling up those kiddie pools every day, that can kind of get expensive. So it's just something to think about, because they will get in the water and they will mess it up. That's just ducks. They're going to do that. That's just their nature. So it's just something to consider. Now, I don't have any notes made out for this video, so I'm sorry if I skip around a lot, but I promise it will be full of information. You just may have to, like, I don't know, put it together in your brain a different way than I do, because sometimes I kind of scatter, and I'm sorry for that. But basically, so ducks on a homestead. Ducks are, they do not scratch the ground as much as chickens do. So if you don't want something that'll scratch and, you know, maybe throw your straw out of your flower beds, or, you know, scratch up your, I don't know, wherever, anywhere you don't want them scratching, ducks aren't going to do that. They're going to be easier on the land. They will peck around a little bit, you know, and they'll still eat bugs, and ducks are wonderful at foraging just like chickens are, but they don't do as much damage. So in other words, I have a plan for ducks in my garden and the front that I'm currently working on. And my plan is to put a duck enclosure there for runner ducks, and I want them to kind of coexist in the garden. So once my things are established in the garden, my plan is to like be able to let them out in there, hopefully, just a few of them, and just kind of have the whole ecosystem there. Because interesting fact about ducks, if you're looking into fertilizer, ducks are really, really good, and you can't really deny that. Yes, chicken manure is great. But chicken manure you have to scoop and you have to put somewhere, or you have to leave it in there. If you're doing deep litter, you can like leave it in the coop and like layer some shavings on top of it. But either way, you cannot take poop from chickens that's like fresh and put it on your garden. You're going to burn your garden because it's such a high nitrogen content, so it has to compost and age. Ducks, that's not the case. Their manure is ready to be used immediately, meaning those kiddie pools I was talking about earlier, if you have those on your property and those ducks are using those, that's literally liquid fertilizer that's ready to go in your garden. And that's really hard to beat. That's a really good thing. Like that's, it's kind of cool, and it's kind of hard to like dispute how cool that is, because you can literally take like a bucket and go and like scoop it out and get a coffee can and pour it like on your garden for food, for the plants, and it doesn't burn it. You're not going to overdo it. It's a cold compost, a lot like a rabbit. So that's a really cool idea, you know, thought when it comes to ducks. That's a benefit for sure. Also, they, you know, they tend to imprint on their owners a little bit more than chickens do, just because that's their nature. That's how ducks are, you know, that's their programming. They're programmed to kind of imprint on whatever. Like if you get them as babies, they're going to kind of recognize you and won't forget you type thing. And they are really fun to watch. They are extremely messy to brood if you get them as babies, because they're little, but they still need some water, and they're going to, because brooding chicks, when I say brooding, I mean the process of keeping them in an area while they're growing out enough to go outside. So that in between, when you get a little bitty chicken or duck and they need to be cared for until they're old enough to go outside, you have to provide them with something, and that's called brooding them. And while you're doing that, ducks, and they're both really hard to keep clean after a while, but ducks especially, very challenging to keep clean. So that's just another thought. You have to change out their shavings and everything a lot more often, a lot more frequently. But they grow faster. So I don't feel like you have to brood them quite as long, because ducks grow really fast. And they're ready to go outside, I feel like, a little bit earlier than some chicks, depending on the weather, depending on where you are, depending on what kind of housing you have for them. So that's another thought to keep in mind. Another thing to consider with the ducks is there's a reason that they say you're like a sitting duck whenever you're like open for like someone to take advantage of you or hurt you. We're just sitting here like sitting ducks, because they really are very susceptible to predators, even more so than chickens in my opinion. They don't move quite as fast, and they don't go up at night quite as religiously as chickens. Chickens, whenever the sun goes down, they go up. They want to go into their coop, they want to roost, they want to be safe. Ducks don't really seem to have that mechanism in their brain. I don't know. They will, I have one right now that lives with my chickens. Now she does go up with the chickens at night because she's part of that flock. But when I've had ducks that flock together, I've noticed they like to kind of piddle around at night a little bit, like later into the evening. And it's a little harder sometimes to get them to go into their enclosure. So if you're letting them free range, you know, outside, which is the way I keep my animals, like my chickens and my ducks. So they're a little bit more susceptible to predators. Like, it's just easier, they get picked off. And I hate that, but that's always been my experience. So, but when it comes to ducks, so ducks, like I said, the positives in my opinion are definitely, they're fun to watch. They're great. They're just gentle creatures to be around. I like them a lot. They're not mean. You're very rarely going to meet a duck they're not like geese. Geese can be very territorial. Ducks kind of just go with the flow. So they're awesome to watch. They're, you know, like I said, their pond water can be applied immediately to your garden. Their manure is readily used without being composted. And then ducks also really don't mind the cold. They withstand cold a lot better than they actually love it. They don't mind. They don't mind snow. They don't mind ice. They don't mind rain. All of the conditions that would normally keep a chicken kind of tucked away under a tree or inside of their run or coop. a duck is not going to feel that. They're going to be out on those days because they love that kind of stuff. They're not deterred by that at all. They don't mind cold. They don't mind, like I said, they don't mind rain. And then also ducks they don't have the same like molting process as chickens, meaning that ducks will lay through the winter. And a lot of times our chickens, slow down, but ducks, they don't necessarily, depending on the type of duck, especially if you get something like a khaki Campbell or, let's see, I think like Swedish are really good about that. Runner ducks are really good layers. You get one of those breeds and they will keep you in eggs throughout the winter when everything else has stopped laying. So that's a really cool thing also. I think they're a really cool addition to the homestead. I love hearing ducks around. Like, I love hearing the quacking. I love seeing them walk around. There just are some challenges there to think of, if you're considering bringing ducks. So at the moment, I only have one duck. I have, like I said earlier, I have plans to get some runner ducks hopefully next year if I can get the infrastructure in place, because I don't want to bring them here and not have it ready, because that's not going to work out right for me or the animals. Now, if you want to bring chickens on your place, chickens are one of the easiest animals in the whole wide world to take care of. Now, they are kind of destructive. They will scratch at anything that you have. So if you have pretty flower beds full of pine straw or mulch, they're going to strow it everywhere. Just ask my sweet mama. And mine don't do that too bad because they don't really get in the front of the house too much. And I don't have any landscaping in the back. When they do come around, it's after a rain because there's like bugs and they're in the yard. They don't get in my flower beds. It's okay. We can all be friends. But they will do that. They like to get in flower pots. They like to eat your plants. They can just be little nuisances if you're not careful or if you're not prepared for them, okay? They do poop everywhere, but ducks do too. Ducks just have explosive poop. It goes all over the place. None of them are going to be potty trained or nice and decent and say, oh, we're on her porch, so let's not poop here. They're going to poop on your porches if you're letting them free range. That's just part of it, guys. So if you don't want that, then plan to have a big enough run that you don't have to let your chickens out every day. That's just like, chickens are going to chicken, ducks are going to duck. It's just going to be the way it is. They don't know any better. It's just who they are. So, like chickens and ducks, both of them, you never want to have just one. You always want to have several. But chickens, when you get them, you readily find them. You usually definitely find chicks that are already, it's already been determined if they're male or female. So you can buy chicks that are straight run, which means you don't know if you're getting a male or female if you purchase, little bitties because they're tiny. You can't tell yet. A lot of times you can see what's called pullets for sale at places like farm stores, Tractor Supply, local co-ops, things like that will have them. And if they say pullets, that means they're female. They've been sexed already, and 99% of the time it's accurate and you get females out of that. Straight run means you got male or female. Most of the time, if you find ducks in like Tractor Supply, they're straight run, meaning you don't know if you're getting males or females, and usually you don't even know what kind you're getting. If you order from hatcheries, a few hatcheries will sell males and females of certain breeds of ducks, but most of them still sell straight run. That's something else to consider if you're bringing a bunch of like new ducks or chicks to your place. If they're straight run, you may end up with more males than females, and there is a balance there that you have to maintain or you start to get problems. You don't need 2 roosters for 5 hens. That's not a ratio that's going to work. The roosters are going to fight all the time and the hens are going to be worn out from the breeding activity. Same with ducks. One drake, he usually needs like several female ducks. Hens, are they called hens? I don't even know. Under him to, like make it work before you can justify bringing another drake in, or male duck in, because they will fight, they will cause issues with the females, and it's just a big mess. So always keep that in mind, that ratio there. If you buy straight run, that's fine. Just have a plan if you have extras. Here, if I have a bunch of extra roosters, like whenever I incubate eggs and they hatch, I don't know what I'm getting, obviously. So I have a plan in place. My plan is usually I'll sell what I can as far as extra roosters go if I know anybody who's looking. But if not, they're welcome to grow out here and they will end up in the freezer. With ducks, I've never really had that problem with ducks. I've never like butchered a duck or anything like that. Some people do. They like it. It's just not worth it to me. But they're fairly easy to sell because they're a little bit harder to come by. But still, it's something to think about. Also, chickens, just like ducks, they're going to need a place to stay that's safe at night. Chickens like to roost, so meaning they want to get up high when it gets dark. So you want like roosting bars inside of their coop wherever they're going at night. Ducks will sit on the ground. So that's not as important for them. They can have a lower shelter to get in. With chickens, you want like a higher shelter so that you can build like a ladder or something for them so that they can roost on those ladders and stuff, because that's their nature. Ducks, not so much. Like I said, something small. be fine as long as it's enclosed and you can keep them safe. Obviously, chickens are going to lay eggs. They usually take a break in the winter depending on what kind of chicken you get. And that's fine. That's their natural, that's their natural flow. You can sometimes hatch, if you hatch some chicks or get chicks kind of later in the summer, sometimes you can get them laying before the winter, and since they're in their first season of laying, they will not molt the same, so they won't really like slow down as much as the older hens do whenever they molt. Molting is like shedding feathers. They do that every year, okay, because they grow new ones, and whenever they do that, they slack off laying because it takes protein to build feathers, and it takes protein to build eggs, and if their body has to choose between the two, it's going to build feathers because she needs it first. And so that's why chickens, that and the decrease in daylight hours causes a slack, like a lag in your egg production throughout the fall and winter. And that's normal. That's the process. That's the cycle of nature. But something to consider. And sometimes, like I said, you can kind of offset that with chickens by raising some at the end of the summer that will be, and I say end, I mean like kind of midsummer, that will be ready to lay, depending on what breed they are, by like September-ish. And if they do that, then usually you can get through the winter without a huge, it's still going to slow down, but without completely stopping your egg production. But with ducks, it's not so much of an ordeal because, like I said, they don't mind the winter. They don't have to have quite as many daylight hours, I guess, to form eggs. I don't really know. I just know they don't really slack off in the winter. If they're a good laying duck, they just won't. Especially like your khaki Campbells, which are like some of the best laying ducks, really well known for that. They'll get you through the winter usually. With chickens, I think there is always that possibility, if you're interested in raising your own poultry for your family to consume, then chickens kind of provide a resource for that. Like I said, I don't feel like duck is as much of a staple in our diet here, like where we are, in America, like, or anywhere really. I think duck's always kind of a special thing. It's not something that's as easy to cook and deal with and as versatile as like chicken. So chicken, it's the main staple here, like for us to eat. And so raising chickens, you have that opportunity to choose a dual purpose breed, which is a breed that will lay eggs and provide good meat for your family. And that way, if you do ever incubate your eggs, you get extra roosters or whatever, you've got the option, of really good poultry to put into your freezer. Now, any chicken can be used for a meat resource. Any duck can be used for a meat source. But when it comes to, if you're choosing for sustainability purposes on your homestead, things like Dominic's Rhode Island Reds, Partridge Rocks, Barred Rocks, trying to think of some others, Delawares. There are several breeds. You can Google it. Dual purpose chicken breeds. Most of them are heritage breeds they make very good egg layers, and they're really great for consumption if you want to do that. Now that's, like I said, any of them can be put in the freezer, but some, there's lots of things to consider, like how fast they grow out, how they're feathered, their like body type, because some are going to be like heavier. You don't want to like things like leghorns. Can you butcher a leghorn? Yeah, but they're like really flighty, really thin boned birds, and there's not going to have as much meat on them, even no matter how long you raise them out. So things like Dominic's and stuff like that tend to have like a better carcass as far as when you're considering using them as a food source. Now, we personally here, I've done it all. I have had heritage breeds, and that's a really good sustainable way to have your poultry and things like that. Since we have the ability to bring in and order Cornish cross birds, which are made specifically for meat, they don't survive well beyond the point that they're ready to harvest, because that's just how they're bred. Anyway, we have the access to those. We're able to order those, and so that's what we do right now. We order those, we grow them out, they're ready in like 8 weeks, so we can butcher them, get them off of our feed bill, get them into the freezer, and we're done. Because whenever you are raising out those heritage breeds, they're going to take probably like 3 to 4 months to get them to the size that you want them to be, to put in the freezer to justify butchering them. So that's another consideration. If that's not important to you, choose whatever you want. If it is important to you, consider that when you're making your decisions. And then also, like I said, I've done both right now. Don't go in Tractor Supply and buy a Cornish cross and think that it's going to lay eggs for you, because it's not. But before you bring home a breed you're not familiar with, you may want to Google that real quick, like if you're at Tractor Supply and you see several things, because I have seen them sell They will sell the meat birds, the breed, like the Cornish cross, every now and then. And when they do that, it's not always specified on their labeling what that's for. And I don't want you going and buying like a bird that's really strictly meant for meat production and bringing it home trying to like raise it to give you eggs, because it's probably not going to work out, especially if you have we got a hot summer coming and they get a little bigger and they're just not even going to survive through that. So keep in mind, you know, pay attention whenever you're buying, so that you don't accidentally end up with something that's not going to serve its purpose. As with all of them, like I said, you need to make sure they got a nice safe place to go at night, a covered run so that on rainy days, or if you just don't want to let them out, even if your plan is to free range them, let them have a run or somewhere that they can get in those situations where they don't have to necessarily get out every day if you're not home to let them out, or like I said, it's bad weather or whatever. A covered run area, meaning like just an enclosed area that's safe for them. They can get out, scratch around, eat, drink, do their thing. And then a coop, when I speak of a coop, I'm really talking about like the enclosed area where they can go at night to be safe, where they can lay their eggs, things like that, that you can close up and keep them safe. They both need that, no matter who you're bringing on your plate. Finally, I want to throw this out there too, with both ducks or chickens, you do not need a male involved in the process to get eggs. Most people know that, but not everybody does, and I don't ever want to just assume that you do. So if you're living in a subdivision or something, you're considering getting a few chickens, if you get pullets, females, and bring them in, then you're gonna get eggs. You don't have to have a rooster for that to happen. You can't hatch those eggs, but you can still eat them. They're great. They'll produce like crazy. They'll be happy, probably less stressed because they don't have a boy following them around all day, and they'll do just fine for you. So dispel that myth real quick. And then finally, let me say, the reason that I have approached this entire thing from the perspective of bringing in small ducklings or chicks to your farm is because I very strongly believe in biosecurity. I have seen what happens when you I've experienced what happens when you bring an older bird that's sick onto your place, and it can threaten your entire flock. And so I always recommend, if you don't have a friend that you trust with your life, to, or someone that you really know their practices, their biosecurity practices, all those things, be careful what you bring on your farm, okay? It sounds nice to bring in a bunch of laying hens, but if you're getting them from someone that you don't know or you don't trust, you don't know how old they are, you don't know what kind of germs they've been exposed to on that property, or what they could bring to your property if you have existing chickens already. And so for that purpose, I just always encourage, it's worth the wait to get the little ones and raise them and know where they come from. Everything I bring here is either a chick or an egg that I hatch myself. That's just, like I said, I learned the hard way. I brought in a sick chicken. It was an older pullet, like that I brought in from a poultry swap when I was first getting started with chickens. And because you get excited and you want all the kinds and you bring them all in, and one of them was sick and ended up making several of them sick. And I lost a couple, but I ended up getting the rest of them through it. I actually took it to the state lab to be tested to see what we were dealing with. It was a type of pneumonia, and the bird was sick when I got it. I just didn't know it. And so, from experience, be careful. That's my preference. Most people have had no problems. So just be mindful, be careful, whatever you choose to bring on your place, and I'm sure it'll be fine. And don't get discouraged if things don't go your way first. If you don't succeed, try again. You get a predator attack, reinforce your coop, make sure everything's fixed, and then try again. But they're worth it. They're really fun. They're easy to take care of once you get them settled. And I hope this was helpful. A little distracted. I'm sorry, I got some really pretty bluebirds running back and forth to a little bluebird house that I have right here in the front yard. But anyway, that's all I have to say today. It ended up being a lot longer than I wanted it to be. I'm going to try to edit this and cut a whole lot out, but we'll see. Anyway, I hope that until next time, that you find the beauty wherever you are. You can find me here on Mondays on Wally Media Group at 7 at night. And then also I'm across the board, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. I'm Streamwater Farm. Come find me, come follow me, hang out. I post kind of regularly on there. Tips, info, just stuff's going on around here. And I just like to share it. And I'd love to hang out with you. So thank you for hanging out with me this time. And I will talk to you later. Bye.